He was just 7 years old when he first heard the sound that would change his life forever. It was a cold afternoon in November, the kind of day where the wind cuts through your jacket and makes you wish you had stayed inside. He was walking home from school, taking the long way because he didn't want to go back to an empty apartment. His mother was at work. His father was at work. That's how it always was. They lived in a rough part of the city. Not dangerous exactly, but tired. The buildings looked tired. The people looked tired. Everyone seemed to be carrying something heavy on their shoulders, even if you couldn't see what it was. He kicked a small rock along the sidewalk, watching it bounce and roll. He wasn't thinking about anything in particular. Just another day. Just another walk home to sit alone and wait for his parents to come back exhausted from their jobs. But then he walked past a building he had never really noticed before. It was a community center, old and run down, with paint peeling off the walls and a sign that had seen better days. The front door was propped open, probably because the heating inside was broken again and they needed fresh air. And that's when he heard it. A piano. Someone inside was playing. And the sound drifted out through that open door like it was looking for him, like it had been waiting for him to walk by at exactly that moment. He stopped walking. The rock he had been kicking rolled away and he didn't even notice. He just stood there on the sidewalk, completely frozen, listening. He had heard music before, of course. Everyone has. The radio in his mother's kitchen, songs playing from cars that drove past, the television, when his father watched the news. But this was different. This wasn't just music. This was something alive. Something that reached inside his chest and grabbed hold of his heart. He didn't know the name of the piece being played. He didn't know anything about classical music, or pianos, or composers. He was 7. He knew about cartoons and homework, and the way his stomach growled when dinner was late. But standing there on that sidewalk, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He knew that sound was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard in his entire life. Without thinking, he walked toward the open door. His feet moved on their own, pulled by the music, like a fish being reeled in on a line. He stepped inside the community center and followed the sound down a hallway with flickering lights and water stains on the ceiling. The music got louder, closer. His heart was beating fast now, though he couldn't have explained why. He found the room. The door was open just a crack, and he peered through it like he was looking into another world. An old man sat at a piano. His hair was gray and his shoulders were hunched, but his hands moved across the keys like they were dancing. The piano itself was nothing special. It was old and scratched, and some of the keys were yellowed with age, but the sound coming out of it was pure magic. The boy stood there watching for what felt like hours. It was probably only a few minutes. When the old man finished playing, he sat quietly for a moment, his hands resting on the keys. Then, without turning around, he spoke. "You can come in, you know. No need to hide in the doorway." The boy's face went red. He thought about running away, but something made him push the door open instead and step into the room. The old man turned around on the piano bench and looked at him. He had kind eyes. The boy noticed. The kind of eyes that had seen a lot of life, but hadn't turned hard because of it. "You like the piano?" the old man asked. The boy nodded. He couldn't find words. "You ever played before?" The boy shook his head. The old man smiled and patted the bench beside him. "Come here. Sit down. Let me show you something." That was the beginning of everything. The old man's name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that he was patient and kind, and he saw something in that little boy that nobody else had ever seen. He started teaching him the basics. Where to put your fingers, how to read the notes, what all those strange symbols on the sheet music meant. The boy came back every day after school. Every single day. Rain or shine, tired or not, he walked to that community center and sat at that old piano. The old man was a volunteer, giving free lessons to anyone who wanted to learn. Most kids came once or twice, and then lost interest. But this boy was different. He was obsessed. There was just one problem. A big one. When he went home at night, he had no piano to practice on. His family could barely afford rent. A piano was out of the question. Not just expensive pianos. Any piano. Even a small keyboard cost money they simply didn't have. So he did something that might sound crazy, but it made perfect sense to him at the time. He drew a piano on a piece of cardboard. He measured it carefully, using a ruler from school. He drew all 88 keys, just like the real piano at the community center. White keys and black keys, all in the right places. He labeled each one with the note it represented. Then he put that cardboard on his bedroom floor, and he practiced. Every night, for hours, his fingers pressed down on flat cardboard that made no sound at all. He hummed the notes in his head, imagining what they would sound like if the keys were real. He practiced scales and simple songs and exercises the old man had shown him, all on a piece of cardboard that couldn't play a single note. His parents thought he had lost his mind. "What are you doing in there?" his mother would ask, peeking into his room and seeing him hunched over the floor, fingers moving silently. "Practicing," he would say. She didn't understand. How could she? She worked double shifts, cleaning offices downtown. She came home with her back aching and her feet swollen. The last thing on her mind was music. His father understood even less. He was a practical man. He worked at a warehouse, lifting and loading, coming home with his hands rough and his body sore. He loved his son, but he worried about him too. "You need to focus on school," his father would tell him. "Get good grades, learn something useful." "People do," the boy would say quietly. "Rich people," his father would answer. "People who grow up with money and connections and fancy teachers. Not people like us." It wasn't mean, the way he said it. It was just honest. At least, it was honest according to everything his father had learned about how the world worked. You were born into a certain life, and that life had walls around it. You could make those walls a little more comfortable, but you couldn't knock them down. The boy listened to his father. He respected him. He knew how hard his parents worked just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. But deep down, in a place he couldn't even put into words yet, he refused to believe it. He refused to believe that dreams were only for rich people. He refused to believe that the sound he heard that November afternoon was meant for someone else. He refused to believe that the fire burning inside his chest was a mistake. So every night, while his parents slept, he sat on his bedroom floor with his cardboard piano and practiced in silence. He was 8 years old, then 9, then 10. The other kids at school thought he was weird. They made fun of him when they found out about the cardboard. They called him names and laughed behind his back. One kid even drew a fake piano on a piece of notebook paper and pretended to play it in front of the whole class, making everyone crack up. The boy just kept his head down and stayed quiet. He had learned early that some things were too important to explain to people who didn't want to understand. His teachers didn't help either. When he told his music teacher that he wanted to be a pianist when he grew up, she gave him a look he would never forget. It wasn't cruel, exactly. It was worse than cruel. It was pity. "That's a lovely dream," she said. "But maybe you should think about something more realistic too. Just to be safe." He heard that word a lot. Realistic. It seemed like the whole world wanted him to be realistic, to shrink his dreams down until they fit into a box that made everyone else comfortable. But every time he closed his eyes and remembered that sound, that beautiful sound drifting out of the community center on a cold November afternoon, he knew he couldn't shrink anything. That sound had chosen him, and he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of it. He just had no idea how hard the road ahead would be. Years passed, and the boy grew into a teenager. But one thing never changed. His love for the piano only got stronger. By the time he turned 16, He had been practicing on that cardboard keyboard for almost 9 years. 9 years of silent practice. 9 years of pressing his fingers against paper and imagining the music in his head. Most people would have given up a long time ago. Most people would have accepted that some dreams just aren't meant to come true. But he wasn't most people. He had kept going to the community center all those years. The old man who first taught him had passed away when the boy was 12. That was a hard day. He remembered sitting alone in that little room with the old piano, crying until he had no tears left. The old man had believed in him when nobody else did. He had seen something special in a 7-year-old kid who wandered in from the street. Losing him felt like losing a piece of himself. But even after the old man was gone, the boy kept coming back. Other volunteers came and went. Some were good teachers, some weren't. It didn't matter. He learned from all of them. He soaked up everything like a sponge, and then went home and practiced on his cardboard until his fingers ached. When he was 15, something finally changed. He had been working odd jobs for 2 years by then. Mowing lawns in the summer, shoveling snow in the winter, helping neighbors carry groceries, running errands for the elderly couple down the street. Every dollar he earned, he saved. He kept the money in an old coffee can hidden under his bed. He never spent a cent on candy or video games or any of the things other kids his age bought. Every single dollar went into that can. And finally, after 2 years of saving, he had enough. He walked into a pawn shop on a Saturday morning with $214 in crumpled bills. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought everyone in the store could hear it. He walked past the old guitars and the dusty televisions and the jewelry cases until he found what he was looking for. A keyboard. Electronic. Old and beat up. With a few keys that stuck, and a power cord that was held together with electrical tape. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't impressive. A real musician would have walked right past it without a second glance. But to him, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The man behind the counter wanted $150. The boy talked him down to $120. He handed over the money with shaking hands and carried that keyboard home like it was made of gold. His parents didn't know what to say when he walked through the door. His mother looked at the keyboard, then at him, then back at the keyboard. His father just shook his head slowly, but there was something in his eyes that might have been respect, or maybe just acceptance. Their son wasn't going to give up on this dream, no matter what anyone said. The keyboard didn't work at first. Some of the keys made no sound at all, and the speakers crackled with static. But the boy had prepared for this. He had spent weeks watching repair videos online, studying how electronic keyboards worked, learning about circuits and connections, and all the things that could go wrong. He spent 3 days taking that keyboard apart and putting it back together. He cleaned the contacts with rubbing alcohol. He replaced a loose wire with a piece he found at a hardware store. He fixed the power cord properly so it wouldn't spark. And on the 3rd night, he plugged it in and pressed a key. A note rang out, clear and true. The first real note he had ever played in his own home. He sat there in his tiny bedroom at 2 in the morning and cried. Not sad tears, happy tears. The kind of tears that come when something you've been waiting for your whole life finally arrives. From that night on, everything changed. He could finally practice for real. He could hear the sounds he had only imagined for 9 years. He could feel the vibrations under his fingertips and adjust his playing in ways that cardboard had never allowed. He practiced every moment he could. Before school, after school, late at night, when his parents were sleeping. He wore headphones so he wouldn't disturb them, playing until his eyes couldn't stay open anymore. But the world still didn't believe in him. When he was 16, he tried out for his high school's advanced music program. It was a big deal. Students who got in received special training, access to better instruments, and a chance to perform at competitions. It could open doors that would otherwise stay closed forever. He practiced for weeks before the audition. He chose a piece by Chopin. one of the first classical pieces he had ever learned. He knew every note, by heart. He had played it 1,000 times on his cardboard and another 1,000 times on his keyboard. The day of the audition, he walked into the room with his head held high. 3 teachers sat behind a long table, watching him with blank expressions. The piano in the room was beautiful. A real grand piano, polished and perfect. He had never played on anything like it. He sat down. He took a breath. And he played. When he finished, he looked up at the judges, hoping to see something positive in their faces. Instead, he saw frowns. One of them was writing notes. Another was whispering to the person beside her. The head of the music department cleared his throat. He was a tall man with glasses and a beard, and he looked at the boy like he was examining a bug under a microscope. "Your passion is obvious," the man said. "But your technique is unpolished. Rough around the edges. Students who start formal training late rarely catch up to those who began in childhood. I'm sorry, but you haven't been selected for the program." The boy felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He thanked them quietly and walked out of the room. He made it all the way to the bathroom before he let himself fall apart. He splashed water on his face and stared at his reflection in the mirror. A kid with secondhand clothes and calloused fingers and a dream that everyone kept telling him was too big for someone like him. For a moment, just one moment, he thought about quitting. About accepting that his father was right. About being realistic. But then he remembered the old man at the community center. The way he smiled and patted the bench beside him. The way he said, "Let me show you something." The way he believed. The boy dried his face and walked out of that bathroom. He went home and practiced for 4 hours straight. The next semester, he auditioned again. They rejected him again. Same reasons. Same pitying looks. Same advice to find a more realistic dream. He didn't care. He just kept going. He woke up at 5 in the morning every day to practice before school. He stayed at the community center until they turned off the lights and locked the doors. He studied recordings of the greatest pianists in history, listening to the same passages over and over, trying to understand how they made the piano sing. A small church near his apartment heard about him from someone at the community center. They needed a piano player for their Sunday services, but they couldn't afford to pay anyone. They offered him a deal. If he played at their services for free, he could use their piano to practice whenever the church was empty. He said yes immediately. The church piano was old but beautiful. It had a warmth to it that his electronic keyboard couldn't match. He started spending hours there every week, practicing alone in the empty sanctuary with sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. One Sunday, after the service had ended and most people had gone home, an elderly woman approached him. She had white hair and warm brown eyes, and she walked with a cane that clicked against the wooden floor. She had been sitting in the back pew during the service. He hadn't noticed her watching him, but she had been listening to every note. "Young man," she said, her voice soft but steady. "How long have you been playing?" He told her. The community center, the cardboard keyboard, the pawn shop keyboard, all of it. He didn't know why he opened up to a stranger like that, but something about her made him feel safe. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes were wet. "I was a music teacher for 40 years, she finally said. "I've heard thousands of students play. Some of them technically perfect. Some of them headed for great careers." She reached out and put her hand on his shoulder. "But I have never heard anyone play with a heart like yours. You have something special, something that can't be taught. Don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise." He didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not since the old man at the community center. The woman smiled at him. "I'd like to help you, if you'll let me. I think it's time someone gave you a real chance." Standing there in that quiet church, with dust floating in the sunlight and the echo of piano notes still hanging in the air, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. He had no idea that this moment would change everything. And he had no idea how much harder things were about to get before they got better. The elderly woman became his teacher. His real teacher. The kind he had always dreamed of having, but never thought he would find. She had retired years ago, but she still had the fire of someone who loved music with every fiber of her being. She told him that when she heard him play at that church service, something woke up inside her. A feeling she thought she had lost a long time ago. The feeling of discovering raw, pure talent that the world hadn't noticed yet. She didn't charge him a single penny for lessons. When he tried to offer her the little money he had, she waved her hand and shook her head. "You keep that," she said. "You're going to need it for bigger things. My payment is watching you become who you're meant to be." They started meeting 3 times a week at her small house on the edge of town. She had a piano in her living room. Not a grand piano, but a beautiful upright that she had owned for over 50 years. It had been her husband's gift to her when they first got married. He had passed away a decade ago, and she told the boy that the piano had barely been played since then. "It's been waiting," she said quietly, running her fingers along the keys. "I think it's been waiting for you." The lessons were nothing like what he had experienced before. She pushed him harder than anyone ever had. She didn't accept excuses. She didn't let him get away with being almost good enough. She demanded perfection, and when he fell short, she made him do it again, and again, and again. But she was never cruel about it. She pushed him because she believed in him. She saw what he could become, even when he couldn't see it himself. And slowly, week by week, month by month, he started to transform. His technique improved. The rough edges that the music teachers at school had complained about started to smooth out. His fingers moved with more precision, more control. But more importantly, she taught him how to feel the music on a deeper level. How to tell a story with every note. How to make the piano breathe and cry and laugh. "Anyone can learn to hit the right keys," she told him once. "But very few people can make an audience feel something. That's the difference between a player and an artist. You have the heart of an artist. Now we just need to give you the skills to match." One evening, about 6 months into their lessons, she sat him down with a serious look on her face. "There's a competition," she said. "A national competition for young musicians. It's one of the most prestigious in the country. Winners have gone on to study at the finest conservatories in the world. Some have become famous concert pianists." His heart started beating faster. He had heard of competitions like this, but they had always seemed like something from another universe. Something for rich kids with private tutors and expensive instruments. Not for someone like him. "I think you should enter," she continued. "I think you're ready." He stared at her, not sure if she was joking. She wasn't. "The preliminary rounds are recordings. You submit a video of yourself playing. If you make it past that, you go to the regional semifinals in person. And if you make it past that, the finals are held in New York City." New York City. The words hung in the air like a dream too fragile to touch. "There's an application fee," she said, her voice softer now. $200. And if you advance, there will be travel costs. Hotels. Food. I wish I could pay for all of it, but my savings aren't what they used to be. $200. That was more money than he had. His odd jobs had slowed down since he started focusing more on practice. His coffee can under the bed was nearly empty, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. Not now. Not after everything. He picked up extra work wherever he could find it. He woke up earlier and stayed out later. He mowed every lawn in the neighborhood. He washed cars. He helped people move furniture. He even sold his bicycle, the one he had ridden since he was 12, to a kid down the street. His parents noticed how hard he was working. His mother tried to give him some money from her own paycheck, but he refused. He knew how tight things were. He wasn't going to take food off the table for a dream that might not even work out. The night before the deadline, he counted his money one last time. He had exactly $203. Just enough. He mailed the application with shaking hands. The weeks of waiting were torture. He checked the mail every day, even though he knew it was too soon. He couldn't focus on anything else. At night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would feel like to get that letter, to see his name on a list of people who had been chosen. When the letter finally came, he was afraid to open it. He sat on his bed with the envelope in his hands for almost an hour. His whole future felt like it was inside that thin piece of paper. If they said no, it would crush him. He knew it would. He had put everything into this. Finally, he tore it open. His eyes scanned the words. Dear applicant, thank you for your submission. We are pleased to inform you. He read that last part 3 times before it sank in. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the semi-final round. He had made it. He ran downstairs and showed his mother. She burst into tears and hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. His father shook his hand with a grip that said more than words ever could. For the first time, he saw something new in his father's eyes. Not doubt. Not worry. Pride. The semi-finals were held in a city 3 hours away. His teacher drove him there herself, her old car rattling down the highway while they listened to classical music on the radio. She quizzed him on the pieces he would play, made him visualize every note, every pause, every moment where the music needed to breathe. He performed in a concert hall filled with other young musicians from across the region. Some of them had been playing since they were 3 years old. Some of them had parents who were professional musicians. Some of them looked at him with curiosity, wondering who this kid was that nobody had ever heard of. He sat down at the piano and played like his life depended on it. When they announced the results, his name was on the list of finalists. He was going to New York City, but that's when everything started to fall apart. The trip to New York would cost money they didn't have. Plane tickets, a hotel room, food. It added up to almost $1,000. His parents looked at the numbers and went quiet. They wanted to help, but there was no way. His teacher came to him with tears in her eyes. She had sold a piece of jewelry that her late husband had given her. A beautiful brooch that she had kept in a box for years. Too precious to wear, too meaningful to let go. He would have wanted this, she said, pressing the money into his hands. He always believed in impossible dreams. He would have loved you. The boy tried to refuse, but she wouldn't hear it. She closed his fingers around the bills and told him that some things in life are more important than holding on to the past. He had the money now. He had the ticket booked. The competition was just 10 days away. And then, disaster struck. He was helping his father move some heavy boxes in the garage. It was supposed to be a quick job. 30 minutes, maybe less. But one of the boxes slipped, and he reached out to catch it without thinking. He felt something pop in his wrist. A sharp, hot pain shot up his arm. He gasped and dropped the box, grabbing his wrist with his other hand. His father rushed him to the emergency room. The doctor examined him and took some x-rays. The news wasn't good. It's a sprain, the doctor said. A bad one. You need to rest it for at least 2 to 3 weeks. No strenuous activity. And definitely no piano playing. The competition was in 10 days. His father blamed himself. He kept saying he should have moved those boxes alone, that he never should have asked for help. His mother cried quietly in the kitchen, trying not to let him hear. His teacher came over that night and sat with him in silence. He went to his room and closed the door. He sat on his bed and looked at the cardboard piano keys he had kept all these years, now faded and worn from a decade of silent practice. He thought about everything he had been through. The doubts, the rejections, the years of working and hoping and believing when no one else did. And now, when he was finally so close he could taste it, his own body had betrayed him. For the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe the world had been right all along. Maybe some dreams really were impossible. Maybe he had been foolish to think he could ever be anything more than a kid with a cardboard piano and a head full of fantasies. He sat there in the dark, holding his injured wrist, and felt something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Defeat. He didn't leave his room for 2 days. His mother brought him food that he barely touched. His father knocked on the door a few times but didn't push when he got no answer. They gave him space because they didn't know what else to do. What do you say to someone whose dream just slipped through their fingers? On the third day, his teacher came to visit. She knocked softly on his bedroom door. When he didn't answer, she opened it anyway and stepped inside. She found him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall. His injured wrist was wrapped in a bandage, resting on his lap like something broken and useless. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down next to him on the bed, her cane leaning against the nightstand. They stayed like that for a long time, two people sharing a silence that words couldn't fill. Finally, she spoke. "When my husband died," she said quietly, "I thought my life was over. We had been married for 43 years. I didn't know who I was without him. I stopped playing the piano. I stopped teaching. I stopped doing everything that used to make me feel alive." He looked at her. Her eyes were fixed on something far away, some memory he couldn't see. "For 2 years, I just existed. I woke up. I ate. I slept. But I wasn't really living. I had given up on everything because the one thing I loved most had been taken away." She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with tears. "And then one Sunday, I walked into a church and heard a young man playing piano, and something inside me woke up again, because I saw someone who had every reason to give up, but never did. Someone who practiced on cardboard because he couldn't afford a real instrument. Someone who kept going when the whole world told him to stop." She reached over and took his good hand in both of hers. "You taught me that giving up is a choice. And it's a choice you've never made before. Don't start now. Not when you're this close." He felt tears burning in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they fell anyway. "My wrist," he whispered. "I can't play," the doctor said. "The doctor said you need rest," she interrupted gently. "He didn't say your dream was over. He said you need to be careful. There's a difference." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not telling you to hurt yourself. I'm not telling you to ignore what your body needs. But I am telling you that you've come too far to quit without even trying. Go to New York. Sit at that piano. And whatever happens after that, at least you'll know you gave it everything you had." He sat there for a long moment, her words sinking into his heart. She was right. She was absolutely right. He had spent his whole life fighting for this dream. He had practiced on cardboard for 9 years. He had worked every job he could find. He had been rejected and doubted and told 1,000 times that he wasn't good enough. And he had kept going through all of it. Was he really going to let this be the thing that stopped him? An injury that might heal? A doctor's advice to be careful? No, he wasn't. He looked at his teacher, and for the first time in 3 days, he felt something other than despair. He felt determined. "Okay," he said. "I'll go." The next week was the hardest of his life. He couldn't practice the way he normally did. Every time he tried to play, pain shot through his wrist like fire. The doctor had given him a brace to wear, but even with it, certain movements were almost impossible. So he adapted. He practiced with his left hand only, keeping his right wrist completely still. He went over the music in his head, note by note, visualizing every passage until he could play it perfectly in his imagination. He listened to recordings of the piece he had chosen, Chopin's Ballet No. 1, over and over until he could hear every detail with his eyes closed. His teacher came every day to work with him. She helped him find ways to adjust his technique, to minimize the strain on his wrist while still hitting the notes. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about this situation was perfect. But it was something. The night before he left for New York, his father came into his room. They had never been good at talking about feelings, the two of them. His father showed love through actions, not words. Through working extra shifts so there was food on the table. Through fixing things around the house so everything worked. Through being there, steady, and solid, even when he didn't understand. But that night, his father sat down on the bed and looked at his son with an expression he had never seen before. "I owe you an apology," his father said. The boy blinked, confused. "For what?" "For not believing in you. For telling you that people like us don't become pianists. For thinking that dreams were only for other people." His father's voice was rough, like the words were hard to get out. "I was wrong. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. But all I did was put more weight on your shoulders. And you carried it anyway. You carried all of it." He put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Whatever happens in New York, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because you might win, not because you might become famous, but because you never stopped trying. Because you showed me that the walls I thought were around our life were just in my own head." The boy couldn't speak. He just hugged his father, and they held on to each other for a long time. The next morning, he boarded a bus to New York City. The trip took almost 5 hours. He watched the scenery change outside the window, small towns giving way to suburbs, giving way to the towering skyline of the city. He had never been to New York before. He had never been anywhere. Really. The size of it, the noise of it, the sheer, overwhelming energy of it made him feel tiny and insignificant. But he didn't let it shake him. He had come too far for that. The competition was held in a grand concert hall in the heart of the city. When he walked inside, his breath caught in his throat. The ceiling soared above him like a cathedral. The seats were covered in red velvet. The stage held a massive grand piano that gleamed under the lights like something from a dream. This was where legends had performed. This was where careers were made and broken. And somehow, against all odds, he was here. He found his way backstage, where the other finalists were warming up. There were 12 of them in total, young musicians from all over the country. Most of them looked calm and confident. They had expensive clothes and professional demeanors. They stretched their fingers and ran through scales like, this was just another day. He stood in the corner, trying to stay out of the way, his wrist throbbing under its brace. 2 of the other competitors walked past him, talking to each other. One of them glanced in his direction and smirked. "That's the kid from the community center," he heard one of them say. "I heard he learned on a cardboard keyboard. Can you imagine?" They laughed and kept walking. He felt his face go hot. For a moment, all the old doubts came rushing back. Who was he to be here? And what made him think he belonged in a place like this, surrounded by people who had been groomed for success their whole lives? But then he thought about his teacher, about his father's words the night before, about the old man at the community center who had seen something in a 7-year-old kid and decided to give him a chance. He thought about the cardboard piano that those other competitors were laughing about. The same cardboard piano that had taught him how to dream when dreaming was all he had. They could laugh all they wanted. He wasn't here for them. He was here for everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Everyone who had ever been laughed at for daring to want something more. A voice came over the speaker system, calling his name. It was his turn. He walked out onto that stage, the lights blinding, the audience a sea of shadows. The grand piano waited for him, beautiful and terrifying. He sat down on the bench. He placed his hands on the keys. His wrist screamed in protest, but he ignored it. He closed his eyes and took a breath. And then he began to play. The first note rang out into the silence of the concert hall. It hung in the air like a question, delicate and pure. He had chosen Chopin's Ballade No. 1 for a reason. It wasn't just a piece of music to him. It was a story about struggle and longing, about fighting against impossible odds, about refusing to give up even when the whole world is pushing against you. It was his story. His wrist burned with every movement. The pain was constant, a sharp reminder that his body wasn't ready for this. But he pushed through it. He had pushed through worse. He had pushed through years of doubt and rejection and silence. What was a little physical pain compared to all of that? The music grew louder, more intense. His fingers flew across the keys with a precision he didn't even know he had. All those years of practice. All those nights on the cardboard keyboard. All those hours at the community center and the church and his teacher's living room. It all came together in this moment. He wasn't just playing the notes. He was living them. In the audience, people started to notice something unusual. This wasn't just a technically skilled performance. This was something different. Something raw and honest and deeply human. The young man at the piano wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was pouring his entire soul into the music, holding nothing back. An elderly woman in the third row wiped tears from her eyes. A music critic, who had seen hundreds of performances, leaned forward in his seat, his pen forgotten in his hand. Even the other competitors backstage stopped their conversations and listened. The piece built toward its climax. The notes came faster, more urgent, crashing over each other like waves in a storm. His wrist was screaming now, the pain almost unbearable, but he was so deep in the music that it barely registered. He was somewhere else entirely, lost in a world where nothing existed except the piano and the story he was telling. And then came the final passage. The storm gave way to something gentle, something hopeful. The music softened, slowed, became almost unbearably tender. It was the sound of someone who had been through the fire and come out the other side. Not unscathed, but alive, changed, stronger. He played the last few notes with his eyes closed, feeling each one vibrate through his fingertips and into the air. The final chord faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The concert hall was completely still. You could have heard a pin drop. He sat at the piano, with his hands still resting on the keys, afraid to look up, afraid of what he might see. And then the applause began. It started slowly, just a few people clapping. But it grew quickly, spreading through the audience like wildfire. People rose to their feet, one by one, then in groups, until the entire concert hall was standing. A standing ovation. He looked up, blinking in the bright lights, and saw something he had never imagined he would see. Hundreds of people on their feet, applauding for him. Some of them were crying. Some of them were cheering. All of them were looking at him like he had just done something extraordinary. He didn't know what to do. He had never experienced anything like this. So he just sat there, overwhelmed, as the applause went on and on. Later, backstage, the other competitors looked at him differently. The ones who had laughed about his cardboard keyboard wouldn't meet his eyes. Others came up to shake his hand and tell him how moved they had been by his performance. But he barely noticed any of it. He was in a daze, still trying to process what had just happened. When they announced the results, he almost didn't hear his name. First place. He had won. The judges called him back to the stage to receive his award and give a short speech. He walked out on shaky legs, his mind completely blank. When they handed him the trophy and the envelope containing his scholarship to one of the best music conservatories in the country, he just stared at it like it wasn't real. Someone handed him a microphone and asked him to say a few words. He looked out at the audience. Somewhere in the back, he knew his parents were watching. They had scraped together enough money for bus tickets at the last minute, wanting to be there no matter what happened. His teacher was watching too, from her living room hundreds of miles away, through a live stream on her old computer. He thought about all the people who had doubted him. The music teachers, who told him to be realistic. The kids who made fun of his cardboard piano. Everyone who had ever looked at him and seen nothing but a poor kid with an impossible dream. And he thought about the people who had believed in him. The old man at the community center, who gave him his first lesson. His teacher, who sold her precious jewelry so he could compete. His father, who finally understood. His mother, who never stopped praying. "I don't have a big speech prepared," he said, his voice shaking a little. I'm just a kid from a small apartment who fell in love with a sound. That's all I've ever been. And for a long time, everyone told me that wasn't enough. That I needed more. More money. More connections. More of all the things I didn't have. He paused, looking down at the trophy in his hands. But I learned something. I learned that sometimes the only thing you really need is to refuse to give up. To keep going when it doesn't make sense. To practice on cardboard when you can't afford a real piano. To believe in yourself when nobody else does. He looked up at the audience. This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who has ever been told their dreams are too big. Everyone who has ever been laughed at for wanting something more. You're not crazy. You're not foolish. You're brave. And if you keep going. The audience erupted in applause again. That night, he called his teacher from his tiny hotel room. She answered on the first ring, like she had been waiting by the phone. I watched the whole thing, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Every single note. You were magnificent. I couldn't have done it without you, he told her. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. No, she said softly. I just helped you see what was already there. The belief was always yours. I just reminded you of it. They talked for a long time that night, about music and dreams, and the strange journey that had brought them together. Before they hung up, she told him how proud her late husband would have been. How proud she was. 6 months later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. He played at her funeral, the same church where she had first heard him perform. He played the hymn that had started everything between them, and he didn't try to hold back his tears. Today, he performs on stages all over the world. He has played in the greatest concert halls, for audiences of thousands, in cities he once only dreamed of visiting. But he has never forgotten where he came from. He started a music program for kids who can't afford lessons. Real pianos, real teachers, real opportunities. The kind of chance that someone once gave him. On the wall of that program's main room hangs a framed photograph. It shows a young boy sitting on a bedroom floor, his fingers pressed against a piece of cardboard covered in hand-drawn piano keys. His eyes are closed. His face is peaceful. He is lost in music that only he can hear. Beneath the photograph, a small plaque reads, "They said it was impossible." He didn't listen. His father volunteers there sometimes, helping with maintenance and repairs. He tells everyone who walks through the door the same thing. See that picture? That's my son. He taught me that doubt is just a door waiting to be opened. And somewhere, in a small apartment, in a rough part of some city, another child is dreaming of a sound they heard through an open door. Another child is drawing piano keys on cardboard. Another child is refusing to give up. The music never stops. It just finds new hands to play it.